So my contents of my presentation will offer two perspectives. Okay, the first one is an AI perspective on the question of whether AI is a teacher's friend or foe. So that may be the first time this has been done. I don't know, but hopefully. So we're gonna listen and understand an AI perspective on AI. And the second is a language teacher's perspective on that question. Okay, and then I'm going to follow it up with a message from our sponsors, which is how to create an AI-powered interactive 90-minute language lesson with Zengengo in 10 minutes. That's the message at the end of the webinar here. Okay, so an AI perspective on the question of AI. Now, I'm going to show you a video, and everything that you see in this video is generated by AI, okay? So the voice and the face of the speaker in the video are generated by AI. There's a site called synthesia.io that will create these kind of videos for you. And even the opinion given by the speaker in the video was generated by AI. And I'm going to explain in more detail a bit later about how that was done. But for now, I can tell you that basically I provided AI with a prompt. Is AI the language teacher's friend or foe? I think that AI is the language teacher's friend because, and then the AI system filled in the rest of the information. Okay, so go ahead, watch this video. And this is an AI opinion on whether AI is a friend or foe. Let me just make sure I'm sharing my sound. 1 second, please. Sorry. Okay.
I think that AI is the language teacher's friend because it helps to produce more efficient language learners. For example, it can help language students to avoid mispronunciations, it can help them to remember new vocabulary more easily, and it can help them to avoid errors in writing and speaking. Since I am a language teacher, I think that AI will help me to become a better teacher. In the near future, AI will be able to help me to monitor my students' progress and to make suggestions to them based on the data that it will collect. AI can help language teachers and students in many different ways. There are, however, some pitfalls that must be avoided. AI will help language teachers to become better teachers, but we must always remember that the most important aspect of language teaching is human contact. No amount of AI will ever be able to replace a friendly smile.
Okay, so I think she went off script there slightly, and by describing herself as a language teacher, she kind of she jumped the gun and basically adopted that role for herself. Just a reminder that I only provided the AI with the prompts, which is this that I showed you before. This was the prompt that the system was given, and the rest of the speech there was actually generated by AI. Okay, so the AI kind of went with the prompt that I'd given it, the AI's language teacher's friends, but then it also provided this kind of opposite opinion about, you know, the human smile, and AI will never fully replace a human teacher. So that's quite interesting. Let's go to the next page. So this was generated by a website and a system called OpenAI, and by a language model called GPT3, which you may or may not have heard of, but I think that you will hear of it because it's kind of a groundbreaking thing that's just come into public consciousness. And so OpenAI GPT3 is a first of its kind API that can be applied to any language task. Okay, so it can manage a variety of different language tasks. It's best in English, but it can also deal with other languages as well. GPT-3 stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer 3. And it's a third version of this software that has been released, of this system that's been released, and it's getting progressively better and better as Professor Gorham noted, that these waves of AI coming through, and every time it gets more and more human and more capable in what it can do. It was created by OpenAI, a research business co-founded by Elon Musk. I'm sure you've heard of him. It's been described as the most important and useful advance in AI for many years. And it was trained on 570 gigabytes of web-based text information. So it basically crawled the web and absorbed all of the written text that's available in a publicly accessible form on the internet. And it kind of analyzed and evaluated that text in order to figure out how to produce original text by itself. It was done with the largest artificial neural network ever created, and it was used to generate this language prediction model. Okay, so it was trained on 175 billion parameters at a cost of $4.6 million. So this is a serious system here. So what is a language prediction model? It basically means that it will try to predict what is the most natural or useful text, given what it has been given previously. So I said, as I explained before, I provided a prompt, and then the system kind of went with the prompt and continued writing in the same vein. Okay, and you can even do things like, please write me advertising copy for a depressed teenage girl. Okay, and it will look at that and go, okay, let's modify the language here to appeal to that particular demographic. So it can understand to that level, that semantic level. It's very, very mind-blowing. So here are some more examples of what OpenAI can do and using GPT-3. And these are some things that traditionally teachers have regarded as being the domain of their own ability. And this is something that maybe teachers think, oh, this is what we do, this is our job. And this indicates to me that these areas of our job will be eroded or replaced possibly. So here's a grammar correction. In these examples, the bold text is my prompt to the system, and the non-bold text is the system's response. Okay, so I said to it, please correct the grammar in these sentences. I gave it some examples, and then it started to give me the correct answers. So she liked ice cream became she likes ice cream. I want play football became I want to play football. I have a lot of money. I have a lot of money, sorry, I have a lot of money. Then I thought, okay, well, that's interesting. It works pretty well on these contrived examples, these very simple contrived examples, but how does it perform on actual student text? So this is an example. The last one I provided was from an actual student essay that I received in one of my classes. There are many salary men not want to go home after their work ends. Now that contains multiple errors, okay, not just one error. And the system came back with a correct sentence. There are many salary men who do not want to go home after their work ends. I was very impressed that it could identify, multiple errors and fix multiple errors in a single sentence. And this system is actually already being used by Duolingo to give corrections on French. And they have done a study. Duolingo is always the first to do these things. They have done a study that it actually does lead to measurably better second language writing skills. Okay, and I'll come back to that in a moment about whether it actually can be used to improve the learner's ability or whether it's instead used to replace their ability. But let's come back to that. Okay, so another thing that AI can do that we maybe formerly thought was in the domain of purely of humans is to generate comprehension questions. So here I provided a text, a very simple text about me, and I provided an example of what I wanted it to do. What is my name? And then the answer in brackets, Paul. And then it's provided questions 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so it looked at the text, it figured out what would be a good question, and it figured out what the answer is as well. So this could be quite a big time-saving, facility for teachers. If you tend to give your students a lot of comprehension texts, as I do, this could be a big time saver for you. And it will actually copy not just the content, but the form of the question. So because I put the answer in brackets, it went, oh, he wants me to put the answer in brackets. Okay, I'll do that. So it copies the format of the text and also the content as well. Another thing that it can do is to generate discussion questions. I say we've got comprehension questions, and we often, as language teachers, we also want students to discuss the themes or the implications of a text beyond the text itself. So here I copied and pasted a excerpt from Wikipedia about Walt Disney Company. I provided some examples. Again, you always have to provide examples for it to understand what you want it to do. Okay. So the questions 1 and 2 are my questions, and then questions 3 to 8 are the computer's AI questions. And 8 was particularly impressive for me. It just looks like it was written by a human being. I mean, I find it hard to believe that the system can come up with a question like this. Do you think Disney princesses are good role models? Why or why not? So yeah, I would definitely use these kind of questions in a class, in a real class. You could take this and put it directly into your lesson plan without much modification at all. Another thing that it can do is text simplification. Now, the system has a template for simplifying for a 5-year-old. But I think with a bit of fine tuning, it could be done for, say, okay, I have a CEFA level C1 text, and I want to adapt it for CEFA level A2 or CEFA level B1, maybe, But in this example, it was asked to simplify for a 5-year-old. And there's a passage about the solar system. And you can see that I've underlined in red here a part of the passage being primarily composed of rock and metal, talking about Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. And then in the simplified version, because they are mostly made of rock and metal. Okay, so it is taking the sentences and the same content from the original passage and trying to phrase them in a simpler way. Okay, now I got some negative feedback when I posted this on Facebook. A few people were saying, yeah, but look at all the mistakes it's made. It's not perfect. I'm not trying to say it's perfect. And I'm not particularly advocating for it either. I'm just saying that it is quite impressive, and it can do a lot more than we maybe think it could do. Okay, so it's grammar correction, comprehension questions, discussion questions, and text simplification. Those are 4 examples of things that language teachers do every day, pretty much, and that could be, taken over by AI. Okay, so coming back to the question of, is AI a language teacher's friend or foe? I think the important question that language teachers are asking themselves is AI trying to help me, or is it actually trying to replace me? And Professor Gorham touched on this quite a lot. And underlying that is a more fundamental question. Will AI produce more efficient language teachers and learners, or will it simply negate the need to learn language altogether? Okay, so if we can do what we want to do, communicate in a foreign language with other people, using technology and without ever having to learn a language, could that outcome become real? Learning a language will no longer be necessary at all. Okay, so that's a really strong conclusion to make. And I'm not making that conclusion. I'm just asking the question, really. Okay, so I suggest that in order to judge whether or not it will help to produce more efficient language learners and teachers, or negate the need to learn a language altogether, we can rely on some frameworks that already exist and that we're very familiar with. These have been around since the late 70s or early 80s. Computer-assisted language learning is the use of computers to assist the learning of a language. So it does what it says on the tin. Okay, the clue is in the name. Okay. So computer technology has to assist the learning of a language. The same with technology enhanced learning. So either of these acronyms, could be used in this case. It is technology that enhances the learning of a language. So that's the kind of litmus test that we're holding up AI and AI-powered technology or AI-powered software, and we're saying, okay, is this good for language learners? Does it assist or enhance the learning process, or does it replace the learning process? Okay. So I'm going to give some examples of things that I think that I would argue are neither call nor tell. Okay, and I'm sure that you guys can think of some more. If you can, please write them in the chat. First of all, pasting an essay in L1 into a machine translation service such as DeepL, and then handing in the L2 translation without even reading it. Okay, this some unscrupulous students, I have to say, do this, okay, or will have the tendency to do this. They will just write the essay in their L1, paste it into machine translation, get the output, and hand that in as their own work. Okay. Now, if they were going to their sister or brother or parent who spoke really good English, for example, and asking them to write the essay for them, obviously that would be impermissible and judged as plagiarism or cheating or something like that. Then another example could be asking OpenAI to write an essay for me that compares and contrasts living in a big city with living in a small town. You'll notice a little asterisk there. I'll come back to that in a minute. And then handing in the output without even reading it. Okay, so again, it's the same as going to a friend and saying, hey, you're better at English than me, please write this essay for me. That's the same thing. It's just going to an artificial intelligence rather than a human intelligence, okay? Using a grammar checking service such as Grammarly to correct grammatical mistakes in a piece of writing without noticing or processing the mistake. So we have this concept in second language acquisition called noticing. We have to notice the gap between our speech or our writing and the correct form of the speech, the correct form of the writing. And unless we notice the difference, we can't improve, we can't move toward that ideal without noticing the difference. So if a student uses a grammar correction service without looking at the mistakes that have been corrected, I don't think it can be classed as either call or tell. And I'm interested to know in that Grammarly study, like how they measured or what they did simply beyond exposing students to the mistakes. I'd be interested to read more about that. So coming back to the asterisks, asking AI to write an essay for you, yes, it can do that. Okay, so here's an example. I put, again, the bold is my text and the non-bold is the computer text. Write an essay for me that compares and contrasts living in a big city with living in a small town. And then I started, there are advantages, disadvantages, living in a small town, for example. And after that is all AI, okay? I can give you a moment to just read that for yourself without reading it aloud. So one thing you'll notice here is the student, the AI for some reason is not fond of using sentences. It's just like one long sentence with about 100 commas. So it's not well formatted, okay? But it is on topic and it is relatively well written apart from the structural issues, right? So obviously, again, it's not perfect. It could be fine tuned, but it is answering the question to some extent. Yeah. So what are some uses of AI that could be call or tell as we traditionally understand those concepts? So I'm going to flip around those three examples I gave that were not call or tell. Translating an L1 essay into L2 and comparing the translation you have written with the output of machine translation. So you first of all, you translate the essay yourself, using your own brain, your own L2 knowledge and skill, and then you see how the machine would do it and you compare, okay, is one of these translations more natural than the other? Is one of these translations more accurate or better than the other? And how is it better? How is it more natural? That way the student can maybe improve their own ability to write in L2. That depends whether you're a fan of a grammar translation method or not, I guess, as well. But that is a technique that's still used in some classrooms. Using OpenAI to help you brainstorm for an essay that compares living in a big city or small town. So as we saw previously, that text it produced, I would say, would be more suitable for a brainstorm. And if I had put in bullet points, the AI would have produced bullet points. So I think we could say, okay, students can go to Google to brainstorm a topic. In the future, they'll go to AI to brainstorm a topic and ask the AI, okay, please help me brainstorm this topic. Yeah. And finally, using a grammar checking service such as Grammarly to correct grammatical mistakes and studying corrections in order to apply them in future writing. So there has to be some follow-up activity. Just getting the corrections from Grammarly and going, hey, great, okay, now my writing is perfect, I'm going to hand it in, is not learning like what was wrong originally. Now, maybe that's okay. Okay, and that comes back to the thing about, okay, AI is going to negate the need to learn a language, because if we can produce grammatically correct utterances that do what we want them to do without learning a language, maybe that's okay, Right, so this is another question that language teachers might be asking themselves. We do get headlines like this coming up occasionally in our news feeds. One is news about some synthetic humans could be taking your job. This is similar to what I showed you previously with the speaking deepfake avatar. They're called avatars. Berlitz actually has already done this. Okay, so this is already happening. Berlitz has released a course of language learning that uses synthetic avatars to deliver the content. This guy, Michael Wilkins, is saying that language teachers are pretty much obsolete. You can Google that if you want to read the whole article. And this other headline is saying, okay, let's use AI solution or use our AI solution rather than engage native teachers. So there are companies out there who are, offering AI as an alternative, as a replacement for human teachers, and that will continue to happen, I think, So this brings us back to the question, are there things that humans can do, that human language teachers can do, that AI cannot do? And it's something that we touched on, like what are the soft skills that can't be replaced by AI? Well, we can suffer, okay? Now, that is a uniquely human trait. Well, I guess animals too, but I don't know any AI is not conscious. It's important not to confuse the appearance of consciousness with actual consciousness. So AI cannot suffer. We can suffer. We can work to reduce our suffering. And I think learning a language is an attempt to do that. It's an attempt to cooperate and communicate with people from other cultures, other linguistic backgrounds, and we want to cooperate and communicate in order to reduce suffering and in order to make our lives more efficient and smoother in some way. We can empathize. We can empathize with our students' struggle to learn a language. If we have learned a language ourselves, or if we've learned the language that we're teaching, we can empathize with our students' struggle to do the same thing. And then we can care about the students' struggle, and we can help them, we can give them strategies to deal with that struggle more efficiently and more effectively. We can be human role models. Okay, an AI can provide an accurate grammatical model of language. It can provide an accurate phonetic model of language, but it can't do it as a human being. So again, if you want humans to learn a language from other humans, then obviously AI can't do that. It's not human, so it can't do it. And we can interact as humans. So, you can interact with AI, and there are AI chatbots out there that will interact with you as if they are human. This human facade, I think that Professor Goran mentioned, that is kind of a human veneer. It looks human, it's kind of in the uncanny valley. It seems human, it's not human, so it's not quite there, but it could be there in the 6th or 7th wave of AI. It could be real enough to convince us that we are talking to a human and passing the Turing test, for example. Okay, this last one is a bit of a out of left field kind of comment, but using languages to enter into romantic relationships. And I'm saying this is particularly relevant in countries such as Japan, where the government is doing its utmost to increase the birth rates. Okay, so you probably don't want to have a romantic relationship with an AI. Although there is a film that deals with that. If you're interested in that concept, it's called Her. It stars Joaquin Phoenix, I think, and he falls in love with an AI voiced by, I can't remember the actress's name now, but anyway, the film is called Her. And I think you wouldn't want to use AI to orchestrate a romantic relationship with another human being. Like, imagine typing in like your words into an AI, and then the AI would translate it and the AI would speak it. You kind of lose a bit of the romance in that interaction, maybe. I could be wrong. I'm happy to be proved wrong by that.